Is there any pain greater than holding over $800 million in your hands, yet facing a final chapter soaked in tears? Céline Dion, the woman who once made the whole world hold its breath with a single note. She sang the power of love. Like love itself could heal all wounds. She gave the world, "My heart will go on," and hearts everywhere broke with her. But behind every ovation was a silence no one heard. Behind every sparkling gown, a body trembling through illness. Behind the roar of applause, a woman singing through unimaginable grief. Her voice carried the weight of love lost, dreams postponed, and a private pain masked by public perfection. The fortune she leaves behind is nothing short of staggering. Estimated at $800 million, it's a testament not just to her voice, but to her unrelenting spirit. More than 250 million records sold. Las Vegas residencies that redefined entertainment history. A perfume empire. Fashion ventures. Real estate that spans the map like chapters in a dream. A $72 million Bahamian-inspired estate in Jupiter Island. A French chateau on a private island in Quebec, valued at $25.5 million, and a serene mansion in Nevada, now worth $4.5 million, where her children's laughter still echoes through golden corridors. Her garage holds a Maybach 62, a Mercedes-Benz S350, and a Cadillac Escalade. Each vehicle a silent witness to moments of triumph and heartbreak. Her jet, a $42 million Bombardier Global Express, wasn't just for luxury. It was her way of being everywhere and nowhere, escaping grief while chasing duty. But this story isn't about wealth. It's about the weight that comes with it, because every dollar in that fortune carries the imprint of a sacrifice. A show performed after losing the love of her life. A tour continued with failing health. A voice pushed to its limit while her body screamed for rest. What she built is more than an empire. It's a monument to resilience. Yet what she gave up can never be priced. And now, as her family stands quietly before the legacy she's leaving behind, they don't see assets. They see the woman behind them. A mother who gave them everything. A wife who loved beyond reason. An artist who bled into every note. If her music has ever walked with you through heartbreak, consider leaving a tribute below. Even a single like is a whisper of gratitude for the voice that carried us when we couldn't carry ourselves. How devastating it is to enter the world wrapped in music, yet starved of everything else. Céline Marie Claudette Dion was born on March 30, 1968, in the small working-class town of Charlemagne, Quebec. She was the youngest of 14 children, a family overflowing with song but empty of means. Her parents were musicians. The house was filled with harmony, yes, but it was the kind that echoed off bare walls and empty cupboards. There was not enough food, not enough space, not enough warmth. Her first crib wasn't a crib at all. It was a drawer. Pulled from a wooden cabinet and lined with blankets, it cradled a baby who would one day move millions, but at that moment had nothing but melody to cling to. Her lullabies weren't sung. They were overheard, notes drifting from her siblings' rehearsals late at night, when the cold crept through the floorboards. From the very first breath, Céline's life wasn't about comfort. It was about endurance. And through that endurance, something rare and staggering was born. By the age of 5, she sang at her brother's wedding. Not as a novelty act, but because her voice had already started to break through the noise of poverty. She didn't sing for fun. She sang like it was her lifeline. By 12, she was writing songs with her mother and recording demos with her brother Michel. They recorded one tape, just one, and mailed it to a man named René Angelil, a music producer in Montreal. When he heard her voice, he wept. He said it was the voice of an angel. And then he did something no one expected. He mortgaged his house, his only home, to fund her first album. That was not business. That was belief. That was a sacred gamble on a fragile girl with crooked teeth, shy eyes, and a voice that didn't fit inside her tiny frame. She didn't have stylists or makeup. There was no spotlight, just raw talent wrapped in bone-thin resilience. And how cruel, how impossibly cruel, that such beauty had to be born from such scarcity. While other girls her age were playing with dolls, Céline was standing in front of mirrors, practicing her French vowels, training her tone. While others went to dances, she was in freezing studios, warming her voice with nothing but hope. She learned to pronounce English phonetically long before she understood it, mimicking every syllable like her life depended on it, because it did. She studied diction, breath control, emotional range, at an age when most children still struggled to tie their shoes. She gave up sleep. She gave up school events. She gave up softness, so she could build a dream out of steel. Her first song, La Voix du Bon Dieu, became a hit in Quebec. In 1982, at just 14, she stepped onto a stage in Tokyo at the Yamaha World Popular Song Festival and sang in front of 115 million viewers. That night, the girl from the forgotten corners of French Canada became an international star. But behind that performance, behind every glittering note, was sacrifice. The world saw her gowns, her grace, her voice, but not the birthdays she missed, not the childhood that vanished somewhere between airport gates and rehearsal rooms. In her memoir, My Story, My Dream, she later wrote, "I never had a teenage life. I don't remember prom. I remember microphones and costumes and waking up at 5 a.m. for sound check. The spotlight looked golden, but it burned, and still, she walked straight into it. Because behind her, waiting in silence, was a family whose hopes rested entirely on her fragile shoulders. She didn't just carry her dream, she carried theirs. The weight of 14 mouths that once ate slices of bread cut in thirds. The debt René had staked his life on. The belief that if her voice could rise high enough, they might never be cold again. That was the real pressure. Not fame, not awards, survival. And yet, even under all that weight, she soared. Her voice became the heartbeat of generations. But that ascent, so brilliant, so unshakable, began not with applause, not with Titanic, not in the palaces of Las Vegas, but in a cramped room where a little girl sang just loud enough to drown out her own hunger. A child who didn't know luxury, didn't know vanity, only music, and the ache to be heard. In later interviews, Céline would recall those early years not with bitterness, but with a kind of aching reverence. I would sleep in a drawer, again, if it meant I could still sing. And that is the kind of spirit that cannot be trained, only born. The girl who was cradled in a drawer didn't rise alone. Destiny had already chosen her protector. René didn't just guide her career. He became her anchor, her great love, her shield against a world that would demand more and more of her until there was almost nothing left to give. He believed in her before she ever believed in herself. And that belief lit a fire that never went out. That fire turned into albums, into sold-out tours, into Grammys and Oscars. But all of it, every accolade, every dollar, was built on a foundation of silent sacrifices and invisible wounds. And that's what makes her story so unbearably powerful. Not that she won, but how much of herself she gave away so others could believe in miracles. Her voice was never just a sound. It was a bridge, from poverty to power, from silence to global symphonies, from a drawer to the world stage. And as the years go by, people will remember the anthems, the awards, the standing ovations. But what they must never forget is the little girl who started it all. Not with riches, not with connections, but with a hunger so loud the world couldn't help but listen. But sometimes, even in the harshest winters of childhood, life plants a quiet miracle. One person, one moment, that changes the course of everything. She first met him when she was just 12 years old, a shy, delicate girl with a voice too big for her frame and eyes that hadn't yet learned to dream too far. He was a man of experience, 26 years her senior, a respected figure in the music industry, and the very first person to see her not as a child with potential, but as a soul already carrying greatness. His name was René Angelil. When he pressed play on her demo cassette, something inside him broke open. He did not hear polish. He heard purity. He heard a truth so raw, it made him cry. And he did something few men would ever do. He put his own house on the line to finance her first album. That act was not business. It was belief. It was not a contract. It was the quiet thunder of destiny unfolding in real time. From that moment on, what they built together was not just a career. It was sanctuary. It was trust forged through fire. He became her protector in a world that was never gentle. While the world watched a young girl ascend from obscurity to superstardom, René remained in the background, silent, steady, guarding her spirit from the weight of expectation and the glare of fame. When she was tired, he carried her. When she was unsure, he spoke for her. When the lights burned too hot, he stepped in to shade her. He became the steady breath behind every note she sang. And slowly, imperceptibly, that trust turned into tenderness. That tenderness became love. At 19, she poured her heart into a handwritten letter, confessing the feelings she had long tucked away. At 20, that love bloomed. Quietly, privately, not to deceive the world, but to protect something fragile that the world would never understand. Their bond was not a scandal. It was a shelter. She once said, "He was the only man who made me feel safe enough to be entirely myself." And when she finally revealed the truth to the public, she stood tall against judgment, disbelief, and misunderstanding. Not out of rebellion, but because her love was not a phase. It was her compass. In 1994, they were married at the Grand Notre Dame Basilica in Montreal, in a ceremony that felt more like a sacred vow than a social event. She walked down the aisle not as a global icon, but as a woman choosing devotion with her whole being. Their marriage was never loud. It was luminous. It was not perfect, but it was profoundly faithful. René was not just her husband. He was her manager, her mirror, her emotional anchor, and the father of her children. He was her balance in chaos, her silence in noise, her anchor when life threatened to drift. When she sang about love, she was not interpreting lyrics. She was testifying to patience, to devotion, to a kind of love that deepens with every storm it survives. Together, they built a life that straddled the divine and the domestic, a world of Grammys and baby bottles, world tours and whispered goodnights. He was backstage for every standing ovation, never asking for recognition, only praying that she would shine. And shine she did. But she always knew why, because behind her voice was his hand. Behind her courage was his faith. She gave him everything, her youth, her loyalty, her career, and never once hesitated. Because to her, love was not in the glamour. It was in the waiting. It was in the quiet hours when no one was watching. in the small gestures that built a life while the world chased headlines. Their love story was not built for tabloids. It was built for eternity, not in bold declarations, but in the soft endurance of day after day, year after year, of choosing each other when no one else saw. In later interviews, she reflected, "He was my only love. Every part of who I became was shaped by his love and belief in me." And even now, though the spotlight shows only one figure on stage, Céline knows in every corner of her being, she has never stood alone. When she sang, time didn't just stand still, it listened. Céline Dion didn't chase fame with flash or scandal. She built it breath by breath, from pain, from hunger, from a place deeper than ambition. Her voice wasn't trained, it was endured. Each note held in perfect pitch was once held in silence, while the world overlooked a poor girl from Quebec. In 1990, when she stepped into English-language music with Unison, it wasn't just a new album, it was a risk. She was mocked for her accent, doubted by executives, told that French singers didn't belong in American pop. But Céline didn't break. She bent her vowels, tightened her tone, and let her voice do what words couldn't. "Where Does My Heart Beat Now" cracked the US top 5. Not because the world was ready, but because Céline forced it to listen. She wasn't supposed to belong, but she made herself impossible to ignore. And that was only the beginning. Her voice crossed oceans, broke barriers, melted through language and culture. In 1992, her duet on Disney's Beauty and the Beast turned a cartoon into an emotional reckoning. The Oscar didn't matter. What mattered was that children cried, parents paused, lovers held each other a little tighter. That's what Céline always wanted, not fame, but feeling. And then came 1997, when a ship sank again and the world drowned in her voice. My Heart Will Go On wasn't just a song, it was survival. It became the anthem for grief, for memory, for the kind of love that lives on long after breath is gone. The song earned an Academy Award, a Grammy, and sold over 30 million copies. But behind that trembling vibrato was a woman already beginning to break. What the world didn't see was how heavy success had become. The interviews never asked how lonely it was at the top. The magazines didn't show her collapsing backstage from exhaustion. The cameras captured standing ovations, not the migraines, the vocal injuries, the nights she couldn't sleep because the next day demanded more. And still, she gave it. Every single time. In 2003, when she accepted a Las Vegas residency, critics called it a career graveyard. But Céline made it sacred. Over 700 shows, over $600 million in ticket sales. But the real currency wasn't dollars, it was souls. Over 3 million people sat in her presence and felt seen. Her voice didn't just echo in theaters, it stitched up wounds, said what people couldn't, held strangers who were barely holding on. Her concerts weren't performances, they were confessions, mass, therapy, sanctuary. She didn't just sing, she bled artfully. Even as her voice soared, her world behind the curtain was growing darker. While fans chanted her name, she was fielding whispers of illness, burying pain behind designer gowns and practiced smiles. While awards poured in, something inside her began to wither, slowly, quietly, like a rose fading in a locked room. Yet she never stepped away. She walked through the fire in stilettos, face lit by spotlights, heart burning from the inside out. She stood before presidents. She opened Olympic ceremonies. She shook hands with royalty. But none of that rivaled the quiet triumph of singing lullabies to her sons when the world wasn't watching. Her empire soared beyond music, perfumes, fashion lines, global tours. Her net worth crossed $500 million. But wealth was never her endgame. Her true riches were measured in goosebumps, in tears shed in silence, in letters from fans who survived cancer or heartbreak because her songs told them they weren't alone. She gave pieces of herself to millions, and yet never stopped giving. Her strength wasn't just in her vocals, but in her endurance. She didn't rise by luck. She rose because she refused to sink. Even as the industry changed, trends faded, critics circled, Céline remained unshaken, immovable. She never needed to reinvent herself. She was already singular. And still, as she stood in sold-out arenas, with pyrotechnics behind her and orchestras beneath her, her mind often wandered to quieter things. To a kitchen floor in Charlemagne, to a spoon that became a microphone, to the drawer that once held her like a cradle. The spotlight may have crowned her a queen, but it was humility, discipline, and relentless purpose that kept her standing. Her voice lifted crowds, but it also held together the cracks in her own spirit. And even as the ovations thundered, she knew. Behind every note she delivered, there was a cost no one would ever see. A cost only she could carry. And still, she sang. She had lived a life that glittered like legend, standing ovations in languages she didn't speak, arenas trembling beneath her voice, love letters written in lights from Tokyo to Toronto. For years, Céline Dion didn't just sing, she soared. Her voice didn't echo, it imprinted. Her presence didn't perform, it healed. But no matter how far she climbed, no one escapes gravity forever. And when her fall came, it didn't strike her career.